Sherman sits on the road with its engine cold. Not idling, not coughing, cold. The crew is still inside it at first because that is what tank crews do. They wait for the order. They listen for movement. They watch the road ahead. The same road that yesterday looked like a corridor into Germany, but now the road is empty. No fuel truck, no 5-gallon cans, no quartermaster column coming over the rise, just dust, hedges, abandoned equipment, and a tank that has become a bunker because the gasoline is somewhere else. That is the image. Not Patton shouting. Not a theatrical argument in a headquarters tent. A tank stopped in France in late August 1944, while the German army tries to understand why the American advance has suddenly lost its teeth. And here is the first twist. Army University Press records that by August 29th, Third Army's gasoline shortage had become acute. The advance effectively stalled until September 3rd. Third Army was only about 70 miles from the German border after advancing more than 700 miles in a month. Pause on that sentence. 70 miles from Germany, 700 miles already behind them. And then, no gas. The Germans could have looked at the map and believed they had finally found the defense that worked. Maybe Lorraine had done it. Maybe the Moselle line had done it. Maybe the American spearheads had reached the limit of their recklessness. But the ugly truth was more mechanical. Patton had not run into a German wall. He had run into an empty fuel can. To understand why that mattered, start with the American belief. Speed was not decoration. Speed was a weapon. The Armored Force Manual described armored war as highly mobile, primarily offensive ground warfare, built around power, mobility, shock, and fire. It also warned that sustained mobility depended on timely replenishment of supplies, especially fuel, oil, and lubricants. Read that twice. The doctrine celebrated movement, but it also admitted the secret. A tank is only a weapon, while the supply line is alive. Without gasoline, armor does not become weak. It becomes furniture. In August, Patton's Third Army had been doing something that looked almost physically unfair to the Germans. It became operational on August 1st. Then it tore through the breakout from Normandy, turned loose across France, and kept forcing German commanders to react to the last problem, while a new one was already forming behind them. The enemy believed the Americans had to pause to organize. The Americans kept moving. The enemy believed destroyed bridges and retreating columns would buy time. American engineers, radios, cavalry patrols, air support, and armored columns kept turning time against them. The enemy believed an army that large could not keep changing direction at that speed. Third Army kept doing it. That was the invisible advantage. Tempo. Not speed alone. Tempo. The ability to make the next move before the enemy's mind had finished processing the previous one. And then the advantage began eating itself. By the last days of August, the spearheads had outrun the body. The columns were too far from the beaches. The trucks had to drive enormous distances just to bring forward the gasoline needed for the next enormous drive. At the end of August, Third Army trucks were still picking up loads west of Paris or even back toward the beaches. The average round trip from the Third Army zone took about 3 days. Think about what that number means. A truck leaves to get fuel. It is gone for 3 days. While it is gone, the tanks are waiting for the fuel it may bring back. And the farther Patton advances, the longer the truck's problem becomes. Every mile of success increases the distance to the thing that makes the next mile possible. On August 28th, official history records that gasoline deliveries were 100,000 gallons short of Third Army's daily consumption. That shortage was roughly the amount used by one armored division in a single day of cross-country fighting. One division, one day, gone. On August 30th, Third Army received only 31,975 gallons, far short of estimated daily consumption. A modern viewer hears fuel shortage and imagines inconvenience. A commander in August 1944 saw paralysis. The reconnaissance car stops first, then the tank platoon, then the artillery prime mover, then the ambulance, then the maintenance truck that was supposed to repair the vehicle, that was supposed to tow the gun, that was supposed to cover the crossing. The whole organism begins to lose blood. This was not just a Patton problem. It was an Allied distribution problem. Gasoline existed in the rear. The issue was getting it forward fast enough. Pipelines were not far enough forward. Rail movement was not yet fully ready for Third Army. Roads were jammed. Trucks consumed fuel to deliver fuel. That is the bitter joke of mechanized war. The cure burns the disease. And Eisenhower's command problem was real. He was not deciding between drama and genius. He was deciding how to supply an entire front that had advanced faster than the original plan expected. The Supreme Commander favored a broad front strategy and gave priority toward the northern thrust aimed at Antwerp and the Ruhr through First Army. That meant Patton's Third Army, the army built around velocity, received progressively less of the one substance that turned velocity into violence. Here is the detail that turns the whole picture from strange into terrifying. The Germans did not need to defeat every American tank. They only needed time. Time to pull broken units together. Time to man the West Wall. Time to plan counterattacks. Time for Lorraine's weather and terrain to become part of their defense. Army University Press puts the effect clearly. When Third Army's tempo slowed, it progressively lost initiative. Without sustained pressure, the German decision-making cycle began to catch up. That is the real episode, not Patton's temper. The return of German time. Because until then, Third Army had been attacking the German clock. Every dash, every crossing, every sudden turn created a new decision before the enemy had recovered from the last one. When the fuel dried up, the clock changed sides. German Army Group G began getting the thing it had lacked in August: breathing room. Let me put that side by side. A German commander could survive an American attack. He could retreat from a town. He could lose a bridge. He could even lose a column. What he could not survive was a pattern where each report arrived too late to matter. Fuel shortage broke that pattern. Suddenly the report mattered again. Suddenly the map stabilized long enough for planning. Suddenly the American advance, which had felt like a moving storm, began to look like a line, and lines can be studied. Patton's response was not magic. That is important. He did not summon gasoline out of willpower. He could rage, push, plead, improvise, and exploit every source available, but an empty jerry can does not care about personality. Third Army did what fast armies do when the fuel math turns against them. It scavenged. It used captured stocks when it could. It absorbed air-delivered supplies when available. It kept pressure where pressure was still possible. It converted scraps of mobility into effect. But it could not make a full army move at full speed on half a bloodstream. By September 1st, gasoline was reaching Third Army only in driblets, limiting even small operations. Official history says the Army had no gasoline reserve of any kind. No reserve. That is not a statistic. That is a Sherman commander looking at a road and knowing the road is no longer the obstacle. His own fuel tank is. Imagine the crew. The gun is loaded. The armor is intact. The radio works. The driver knows the road. The German border is not a myth anymore. It is close enough to become obsession. But the machine will not move. A gallon can sit beside the track. Empty. Light enough for one man to throw in anger. That can is the whole campaign in miniature. It is American abundance turned fragile by distance. It is mechanized power reduced to a container. It is Patton's doctrine trapped inside sheet metal. When Third Army resumed offensive operations around September 5th, it was entering a different war. Lorraine was not open pursuit. It was rivers, mud, fortified cities, worsening weather, and German formations with enough time to gather themselves. The same army was still dangerous. Patton was still Patton. But the invisible advantage had been damaged. Speed without supply had become desire. And desire does not cross the Moselle. So what did Patton do when Eisenhower gave priority somewhere else? He did what his army had been designed to do until the physical world refused to cooperate. He pushed. He improvised. He tried to keep the enemy mentally late. He converted every gallon into motion. But the episode proves something harsher than the legend. A commander can create tempo. A staff can exploit intelligence. A tank crew can fight with courage. But gasoline decides whether all of that becomes war or memory. The final truth is not that Patton was stopped by Eisenhower, or by the Germans, or by Lorraine alone. The final truth is colder. The general of speed reached the edge of his own system. And at that edge, the most powerful object on the battlefield was not a cannon. It was an empty fuel can. If you had been Eisenhower, would you have fed Patton's dash or protected the whole front? Put your answer in the comments because that argument is still alive.